I'll give you my salary if you can translate this mocked the millionaire CEO to the cleaning lady. Before we begin today's video, I have a quick favor to ask. Our channel has been slowing down a bit lately, and your subscription can make all the difference. It's completely free, takes just a second, and helps us keep creating meaningful stories for you. Let's grow together. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Thank you so much, and now let's dive into today's story. The morning sky over downtown Seattle was still gray when Ethan Cole stormed into the glass-walled boardroom of Cole International Logistics. He moved like a storm front sharp suit sharper, jawline eyes already simmering with irritation. A folder clutched in his hand was crumpled as if it had already lost the fight. This, he said, tossing a stack of papers across the conference table, was supposed to be the finalized contract with our European partners, but apparently it's written in what is this Basque? A few executives exchanged nervous glances. No one wanted to be the first to answer the billionaire who built his empire by outworking everyone and outshouting anyone. His assistant Mara cleared her throat. "Sir, I already called 3 translation agencies. None have anyone available until tomorrow." Ethan's voice rose. "Tomorrow. This deal closes today. Do we seriously not have a single person in this building who can read Basque?" Silence. The kind of silence that tightens in the air before it breaks. Then Ethan smirked, pacing. "All right, let's make this interesting." He stopped and held up the paper like a dare. "I'll give my entire monthly salary, $200,000, to whoever can translate this right now." A few uneasy chuckles. No one believed he was serious, but everyone knew he was mocking. It was his way of proving dominance. No one in that room could rise to his challenge. That's when a voice came from the back. Calm, steady, uninvited. "I can translate it." Heads turned. Standing near the doorway, holding a mop and a cleaning cart, was Elena Morales, the night shift cleaning lady who had just finished wiping down the hallway floor. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me," I said. She repeated, still gentle but unshaken, "I can translate it." Someone snorted. Right, the cleaning lady knows Basque. But Elena didn't flinch. She stepped forward, her blue uniform, slightly wrinkled hair tied back in a loose braid. Her brown eyes met Ethan's with quiet certainty. "May I see the document, Mr. Cole?" Ethan crossed his arms, amusement flickering. "You expect me to believe you can read this?" "I expect you to let me try." Something about her tone, firm, unafraid, made him pause. Against his better judgment, he handed her the pages. The entire room watched as she scanned them quickly, her eyes moving smoothly, line by line. When she looked up, her voice was even. "This is a notice of property transfer from a family estate in Bilbao. The sender, Lorea Etxebarria, passed away last month. She was your mother's aunt. You are listed as her sole heir." The room froze. Ethan's smirk disappeared. "What did you just say?" "The document says you've inherited land and assets in Spain," Elena continued. "But there's a deadline for acceptance. Today, at 5 p.m. A beat of silence, the kind that humbles even a millionaire. Ethan took a slow breath, eyes locked on her. "Who are you exactly?" Elena handed him back the papers. "Just someone who understands languages people choose to ignore." She turned to leave her mop bucket rolling softly behind her. And for the first time in years, Ethan Coleman, who thought he'd seen everything, stood speechless in his own empire, watching a janitor walk away with his dignity still in her hands. And deep down, he already knew this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. The tension in the boardroom hadn't faded. It lingered in the air like static after a lightning strike. The executives were still staring at Ethan Cole, waiting for him to say something, anything, to make sense of what just happened. Elena Morales had already left her cleaning cart rolling down the hall with a faint squeak, the echo of her calm voice. Just someone who understands languages people choose to ignore kept replaying in Ethan's mind like a song he couldn't turn off. He finally turned to his assistant. "Mara, get me confirmation from the Spanish consulate. Now." 20 minutes later, Ethan's office phone buzzed. He grabbed it, listened, and then went pale. The document was real. Every word Elena had said, every detail checked out. His great-aunt had indeed passed away. The property, the assets, the 5 p.m. deadline, it was all true. The same man who prided himself on knowing everything about everyone in his orbit now realized he'd underestimated the one person he never noticed. By noon, Ethan was walking briskly through the 28th floor searching. He found her in the break room, refilling the mop bucket as if nothing had happened. "Elena Morales." She turned startled but not intimidated. "Mr. Cole." He hesitated, suddenly unsure how to speak to her. "You... Saved me from losing a small fortune this morning." She shrugged. "Just doing what I know." "You didn't have to." "I didn't have to clean your floor either," she replied quietly. "But here we are." Ethan blinked. No one ever talked to him like that, not his executives, not his partners, not even the board. He exhaled and tried again. "Look, I owe you. And I'm a man who keeps his word. I said I'd give my salary to anyone who could translate that paper. That was $200,000. Elena smiled faintly. "You were joking." "I wasn't," Ethan said, though they both knew he had been. "You earned it." Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Then donate it to a school. Or a hospital." "I don't need your money." That caught him off guard. People usually bent over backward to get on his good side. Yet this woman, this quiet, self-contained cleaner, didn't want anything. He glanced at her mop bucket, then at her hands. They were steady, confident, with faint calluses that told stories he couldn't read yet. "Where did you learn Basque?" "From my grandmother," she said. "She grew up near Bilbao. And French-Spanish. You pronounce the names perfectly." Elena didn't answer right away. She went back to rinsing the mop, her reflection rippling in the bucket's water. "Languages were part of my life. Before what Ethan wanted to ask, but the tone in her voice told him not to. Instead, he said softly, "You should be working in an office, not cleaning it." She looked up at him, then eyes calm but unyielding. Sometimes people choose quiet work because it lets them sleep at night. Ethan stood there, unsure what to say. Outside the windows, the Seattle drizzle began to fall, soft, rhythmic, endless. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole didn't feel like the smartest man in the room. He felt like a man who had just met someone who saw through him completely. And, though he didn't know it yet, that quiet encounter would soon unravel everything he thought he knew about power, success, and love. The drizzle never really left Seattle, and lately Ethan Cole found himself watching it more often than he watched his stock reports. 2 weeks had passed since Elena Morales translated the French contract, but the memory of her calm, precise voice lingered like music he couldn't forget. Every time he saw a streak of rain on the office windows, he thought about her words. Silence can say more than words ever could. He hadn't realized how much noise filled his life until then. At first, Ethan tried to stay professional. He asked Elena to assist with small translation projects, Spanish emails, client summaries, notes from European partners. It was an excuse, and he knew it. But she always accepted with the same quiet grace, finished perfectly, and returned to her mop and bucket without fanfare. That contrast fascinated him, brilliance wrapped in humility. One evening, the office had mostly emptied out. Elena was on the 28th floor polishing the glass doors. Ethan stepped out of his office jacket slung over his arm. "You're here late again," he said. She didn't turn still, wiping the glass. "So are you." He smiled. "Touché." For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic squeak of her cloth against the door. Then she asked softly, "Why do you keep asking me to translate for you?" He hesitated. "Because you're good at it." "That's not the real reason." Ethan exhaled. "Maybe I like having someone around who doesn't say yes to me all the time." She set down the cloth and finally looked at him. "You're used to being obeyed." "Guilty." "And when people stop obeying?" He thought for a second, then said quietly, "Then maybe they're worth listening to." Their eyes met briefly, but long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Then Elena broke the silence. "You should go home, Mr. Cole. It's late." He nodded but didn't move. "Do you need a ride?" "I walk. It clears my mind." "It's raining." "I like the rain." He chuckled under his breath. "Of course you do." She smiled small, real almost shy. Then she picked up her cleaning cart and walked away, the sound of her steps fading into the hum of the empty office. The next morning, Ethan walked into a board meeting but couldn't focus. Instead of listening to profit charts, his mind drifted to the sound of her voice, the way she said her daughter's name, Sophia, as if it were sacred. That afternoon, he passed by the employee lounge and stopped. Through the glass door, he saw Elena sitting with a tablet on her lap. On the screen was a little girl smiling and signing with her hands. Ethan stayed by the doorway listening as Elena spoke softly to the screen. "Sophia, can you show me the new word you learned today?" The girl signed carefully. "Thank you." Elena's face lit up. "Perfect, mi amor. I'm proud of you." Ethan swallowed hard. The warmth in her voice, it was something he hadn't heard in years. When she noticed him, she startled slightly. "How long were you standing there?" "Long enough to learn the sign for thank you," he said, gently copying the motion. She couldn't help a small laugh. "You're a fast learner." "Good teacher." For a second, they both just stood there. Him, the man who ruled a corporate empire, and her, the woman who'd somehow become the calm in his storm. Then Elena said quietly, "You shouldn't watch other people's private moments." "You're right," he admitted. "I just didn't realize how beautiful quiet could be." Her smile faded. "Don't make it sound poetic, Mr. Cole. It's just life." But as she turned to leave, Ethan caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flicker of warmth she couldn't quite hide. And as the door closed behind her, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something dangerous. The late summer rain had finally stopped over Seattle, but inside, Cole international tension hung heavier than any storm. It had been a month since Ethan Cole first asked Elena Morales to help with translations. Since then, she'd become something of an unspoken presence in his daily life, quiet but steady, like the heartbeat of the office no one noticed until it was gone. She never sat in meetings unless asked. She never sought attention, yet everyone could feel that the boss treated her differently, softer. Rumors began to circle, the kind that fill empty hallways faster than sound. Ethan ignored them at first, but what he couldn't ignore was how much he noticed her, the way she hummed softly while wiping glass doors, the way she paused before speaking as if weighing every word, the way she smiled when she talked about her daughter. He told himself it was admiration, respect, curiosity, anything but what it really was. That Friday night, the company hosted a private dinner for partners at a downtown restaurant overlooking the Puget Sound. Candlelight flickered on wine glasses, laughter filled the air, and Ethan wore the expression he'd perfected: charming, untouchable, in control. Halfway through the evening, he noticed Elena near the entrance. She wasn't supposed to be there, just overseeing cleaning arrangements for the event staff. She wore a simple black dress instead of her uniform hair, pinned neatly, almost unrecognizable. When their eyes met, time seemed to slow. He excused himself from the table and walked toward her. "You clean up well," he said, instantly regretting how it sounded. She raised an eyebrow. "You should hear how that sounds coming from you." "Sorry," he said quickly. "I meant you look nice." She smiled faintly. "Better." He hesitated, glancing toward the guests. "Would you join us for dinner?" "I don't think that's a good idea. It's just dinner." "Not to them," she said, nodding toward the table of executives watching. "To them, I'm still the cleaning lady." Ethan felt a sharp sting of guilt. Then maybe that's their problem. Before Elena could respond, one of the guests, a venture capitalist with a smirk that always irritated Ethan, walked over, eyeing her. "Cole, you didn't tell us your translator looks like that." The man's tone was teasing, but it sliced through the air like glass. Elena stiffened. Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's not my translator," he said sharply. "She's a valued member of this company." The man chuckled. "Relax, I was complimenting her." "Then learn how to do it respectfully," Ethan snapped. The room fell silent. Conversations froze. Cameras flashed. Elena's cheeks burned as she turned to leave, whispering, "You just made it worse." He caught up with her outside under the awning where rain dripped steadily from the roof. "Elena, wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "You shouldn't have done that. I was defending you." "No," she said softly. "You were defending yourself from looking like the kind of man who'd let it slide." He winced. "That's not fair." She turned, eyes shining in the dim streetlight. "You don't understand. When you stand up for me in a room full of people like that, it doesn't make me equal. It just makes me visible. And I've spent years trying not to be." Her words cut deeper than she knew. Ethan took a breath, stepping closer. "I didn't mean to embarrass you." "I know." The silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. The city hummed around them, cars passing, neon lights flickering. And then, without thinking, Ethan did something reckless. He reached out, brushed a raindrop from her cheek, and before reason could catch up, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a long kiss, just enough to blur the line between what was right and what was real. Elena froze. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she stepped back, eyes wide, not angry, but disappointed. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make me another mistake you'll try to fix." "Elena." "No," she said, voice trembling but firm. "You've lived your whole life taking what you want. I've lived mine trying to stay unseen. You don't get to pull me into your light just because it suits you now." Before he could answer, she walked away into the rain, her figure fading under the city's soft glow. Ethan stood there, rain soaking his suit, her words echoing in his chest. For the first time, he realized this wasn't a simple attraction. It was something far more dangerous because it was forcing him to see the man he'd become. And he didn't like what he saw. For a week, Elena Morales didn't come to the office. No late-night mopping sounds, no quiet hums in the hallway, no steady voice translating impossible languages. Just silence, cold, heavy silence that reminded Ethan Cole how wrong things had gone. He had replayed that kiss 1,000 times in his mind, not because it was romantic, but because it wasn't supposed to happen. He hadn't planned it, he hadn't thought, he'd just felt. And it had cost him her trust. By the 6th day, he couldn't take the silence anymore. He asked HR where she was, but they didn't know. She'd taken personal leave, no return date. That night, Ethan drove through the misty streets of West Seattle until he found himself parked in front of a small community center, the one Elena had mentioned once, where she said her daughter attended classes for hearing-impaired children. Through the window, he saw her. Elena sat on the floor with a group of kids signing slowly, patiently. Her face so calm, so full of warmth, belonged to a different world than his. He stayed outside, watching quietly. When the class ended, she stepped out into the night, locking the door behind her. She startled when she saw him leaning against his car. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "you shouldn't be here." "I know," he admitted, "but I needed to see you." "You already did, at the restaurant." "That was enough. I owe you an apology." She folded her arms, waiting. "I crossed a line," Ethan said, his voice low. "You were right. I'm used to taking control. I didn't think about what that meant for you." Her eyes softened, but her tone stayed guarded. "I appreciate the apology, but you should go home." He hesitated. "Elena, can I ask you something? If it's about translations, call the agency." "It's not." He took out a file from his jacket, thin, creased at the corners. "I found something." Her expression changed immediately, still cautious. "I had a contact in Europe. Look into an old report," Ethan said slowly. "A fraud case at a major translation firm in Madrid. The name Morales appeared in the witness list. You were the whistleblower, weren't you?" For a moment, she said nothing. The streetlights painted soft shadows across her face. "Yes," she said finally. "That was me." Ethan felt the air shift between them. "They blamed you for exposing them." "They didn't just blame me," Elena said quietly. "They destroyed me. My career, my reputation, my home. I lost everything. I came here because this was the only place where no one knew my name." She exhaled the kind of breath that carried years of weight. "I was fluent in 6 languages, Mr. Cole, but truth is the only one that cost me everything." Ethan swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have had to hide. You think hiding was a choice." Her voice trembled just slightly. "After the company went bankrupt, the media needed a villain. They made me one. My daughter was 2 at the time. We barely got out before they started showing up at our apartment." He wanted to say something comforting, but there weren't words big enough to fill that kind of silence. Elena looked away, her tone quieter now. "That's why I clean floors, Mr. Cole. It's honest. It's invisible. It keeps my daughter safe." Ethan stepped closer. "I could help." "No," she said sharply. "Don't try to fix me. That's not what I need." He stopped, guilt tightening in his chest. "Then what do you need?" "For you to understand," she said softly. "I'm not your redemption story. I'm not your lesson in humility. I'm a person who's been surviving in the quiet while men like you make noise about power." Her words hit harder than any headline. Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right." She looked at him for a long moment, eyes gentler now. "You're not a bad man, Ethan. Just one who forgot that respect can't be bought." Then she turned toward her car. Before getting in, she said one last thing over her shoulder. "You once told me you'd give your salary if I could translate something, so here's your translation. Sometimes silence means goodbye." And then she drove away, taillights fading into the wet Seattle night. Ethan stood under the flickering streetlight, holding the file that told her story, but not her soul. For the first time in his life, a man who spoke the language of power finally understood what it meant to be speechless. 2 weeks after that rainy night outside the community center, Ethan Cole's life started to unravel quietly, at first like a thread coming loose from an expensive suit. It began with whispers. Someone from the finance department leaked an internal memo mentioning a cleaning staff member who had been doing private translation work for the CEO. Within hours, gossip turned into rumors, and rumors turned into headlines. Millionaire CEO caught favoring janitor-turned-translator, romance or nepotism at Cole International. The media loved it. Social networks lit up with speculation, and employees exchanged knowing looks in the elevators. By Monday morning, the board had called for an emergency meeting. When Ethan walked into the 30th floor conference room, 5 directors sat waiting, their faces carved in corporate stone. Ethan said, "Richard Hale, the board chair, we've got a serious problem." Ethan folded his arms. I'm aware of the noise. It's more than noise, said Linda Turner, head of PR. We've lost 2 clients since Friday. They don't want to be associated with controversy. Controversy, Ethan shot back. For hiring a qualified woman who happens to clean floors. That's the controversy. Don't make this personal, Richard warned. It is personal, Ethan said, voice low but steady. Because you all looked at her and saw a janitor. I saw someone who could read a legal document in 4 languages and save a deal worth millions. Linda sighed. Ethan, this isn't about her skills. It's about optics. The press is painting a narrative, one where you, a billionaire CEO, are emotionally involved with your employee. Silence fell. Ethan didn't deny it. He couldn't. Richard leaned forward. We're asking you to take a temporary leave until this blows over. Ethan stared at them, jaw tight. And what about Elena? She's been terminated, Richard said bluntly. Effective immediately. HR handled it quietly last Friday. For a moment, Ethan didn't speak. His pulse hammered in his ears. You fired her without telling me. She was a liability, Linda said. You know that. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. She's the reason this company didn't lose the Madrid account last quarter. The reason we got the new French investors. She's the best employee we've had. And now she's a PR disaster, Richard said coldly. Do you want to take the company down with her? Ethan stood up, his voice shaking with restrained anger. If keeping my integrity costs me my job, then so be it. He walked out before anyone could stop him. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office. The skyline glowed through the rain-streaked windows. His phone buzzed calls from investors, board members, reporters. He ignored them all. Instead, he pulled up an old document, the same Basque contract from months ago, the one that had started everything. He remembered the smirk on his face when he'd mocked Elena. I'll give you my salary if you can translate this. And she had, effortlessly, gracefully. He had underestimated her then, just like the world was underestimating her now. He stared at the city lights, a realization hitting him hard. He could rebuild a company, but not a conscience. The next morning, he typed up a resignation letter, printed it, and left it on Richard Hale's desk. Then he called the HR department. Forward me Elena Morales' file, he said. Sir, she's been removed from the system. Then restore it, Ethan said, because I'm about to make her name known for what it truly stands for. 3 days later, the headline changed. Whistleblower translator cleared in international corruption case. CEO steps down in protest. Elena's name was back in the world, but this time it wasn't as a scandal. It was as a survivor. And Ethan, watching from the outside, knew he'd lost everything that made him powerful. But somehow, for the first time, he felt like a man worth listening to. The world moved fast when scandal met truth. 3 weeks after Ethan Cole resigned, Elena Morales' name spread across news outlets again, but this time not as the woman behind a corporate controversy. Now she was being called something else, the translator who spoke truth to power. The headlines told the story that had once destroyed her. Whistleblower translator vindicated after 4 years. International probe confirms fraud at Madrid Translation Group. Elena Morales cleared of all allegations. Justice Slow and Heavy had finally caught up with the lies. Ethan watched every update from his apartment overlooking Lake Union. The board had accepted his resignation with regret, though he knew they were relieved. Investors had already begun to recover confidence, but none of that mattered. He wasn't thinking about money or titles or what came next. He was thinking about Elena. She hadn't spoken to him since that night outside the community center. Not a word, not an email. She'd vanished again, just as before, but this time he didn't go after her. He'd learned that some silences aren't walls. They're wounds that need time. Then, one Thursday morning, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Cole International is hosting a press conference today, 2 p.m. downtown. You'll want to see this. MT. It was from Marianne Torres, his former assistant. Curiosity won over reason. By 4:45, Ethan stood in the back of the packed press hall. Cameras lined the stage. The company's new interim CEO spoke first, reading from a statement about corporate transparency and ethical responsibility. Then she said, "We would like to welcome Ms. Elena Morales, whose courage has inspired reform across our industry." Ethan froze. From behind the stage curtain, Elena stepped forward. She wore a dark blue blazer and simple gold earrings. No makeup, no flash, just calm strength, the kind that didn't need to prove itself anymore. 100 cameras clicked as she approached the microphone. The room hushed. 4 years ago, she began, her voice clear and steady. "I lost everything because I told the truth. I was called a liar, a thief, a traitor. I was fired, blacklisted, and silenced. But the truth has a strange way of surviving even when people don't. Her eyes swept across the crowd, landing too briefly on Ethan. I didn't plan to speak today, she continued, but if my story means anything, I want it to mean this integrity isn't a privilege. It's a choice we make when no one's watching. A reporter raised his hand. Ms. Morales, how did you feel when Mr. Cole resigned from his position in protest? For the first time, Elena hesitated, surprised, she admitted, but also grateful. It reminded me that not everyone in power forgets what it's like to listen. Have you spoken since? Another journalist asked. Elena smiled softly. No, some conversations need the right time, and silence has its own language. The crowd murmured curious, but she said nothing more. When the press conference ended, Ethan slipped out quietly before anyone could notice him. That evening, Rain returned to Seattle, tapping softly against the window panes of Elena's small apartment. Sophia was asleep, a coloring book still open beside her. Elena stood by the window, staring at the city lights reflected on wet streets when she heard a knock on the door. She opened it, and there he was. Ethan. He looked different, tired, humbler, no tailored suit, no air of control, just a man holding an umbrella and a folded newspaper. I saw you today, he said. I figured you might, she replied, crossing her arms but not closing the door. I didn't come to talk about the past, he continued. I just wanted to say you were brilliant up there. Her lips curved faintly. You left before it ended. I didn't want to take the spotlight from you. She studied him for a long moment. You always did like controlling the narrative. He chuckled softly. Not anymore. These days, I'm just trying to listen. A pause hung between them, the kind that once would have been awkward, but now felt like an understanding. Ethan handed her the folded newspaper. On the front page was her picture under the headline, Truth Finds Its Voice. I thought you'd want a copy, he said. Elena took it gently, her fingers brushing his. Thank you. He hesitated before speaking again. They're offering me my position back, but I said no. Why? Because some things aren't worth rebuilding unless you rebuild them, right? I was thinking of starting something new, a consulting firm focused on ethical trade. Small, transparent, honest. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds unlike you. He smiled faintly. It's because of you. Ethan, she began, but he shook his head. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted to tell you that what you did changed more than a company. It changed me. Elena looked down at the newspaper, then back at him. Do you really believe people can change? He met her gaze, only if they have someone brave enough to show them how. She didn't reply, just stepped aside and said softly, You should come in. It's raining. He smiled a quiet, grateful smile and stepped inside. They didn't talk about love that night, or mistakes, or what came next. They just sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee while the rain whispered against the glass. Sophia stirred once peeked out from her room and smiled when she saw Ethan there. For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel the need to run or hide. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come with grand gestures or apologies shouted across boardrooms. Sometimes it arrives as simply as a knock on the door and a man who finally learned to listen. 6 months after that quiet night in Elena's kitchen, Seattle began to look different, not because the skyline had changed, but because Ethan Cole finally saw it through different eyes. He no longer spent his mornings rushing into glass towers or barking orders through Bluetooth headsets. Now his mornings started at a small shared office near Pike Place Market, a humble 2-room workspace with secondhand furniture and a view of Elliott Bay. Across from him sat Elena Morales, typing steadily, her coffee cup half empty and her brow slightly furrowed. They had founded TrueLink Consulting, together a small but determined firm that helped companies build fair, transparent partnerships across borders. No hidden agendas, no lies, no shortcuts. What started as an experiment had quickly turned into something real. They weren't just rebuilding a business, they were rebuilding themselves. One chilly Monday, Ethan walked into the office to find Elena surrounded by papers. Morning, he said, dropping a bag of bagels on her desk. You're early, she said without looking up. And those better be sesame. They are, he said, grinning. I'm learning. She smiled slightly. Miracles happen. He leaned against the desk, watching her flip through documents in both Spanish and English. You've been at this since dawn, haven't you? Deadline for the Mexico project, she said. They need bilingual compliance reports. He nodded. You know, when I first mocked you about translating, I never imagined this. Her eyes flicked up playful but soft. Neither did I. Guess we both underestimated a cleaning lady. And a CEO, he added. They shared a laugh, the kind that comes easily after everything's been broken and rebuilt. By noon, the office was buzzing with quiet energy. Sophia sat in the corner with crayons and worksheets humming as she drew pictures of her mom and Ethan helping people in suits. Every so often, Elena looked up to check on her, and Ethan caught the faintest smile on her face. "How's she doing at school?" he asked during lunch. "Better," Elena said. "Her therapist says her communication's improving. She even taught her classmates some sign language." "That's amazing," Ethan said, genuinely proud. "She's teaching me too," Elena added softly. "About patience. About not needing everything to be perfect." Ethan leaned back in his chair, nodding. "Sounds like she's teaching both of us." That afternoon, a call came in from a major international client, the kind of opportunity that could put TrueLink on the map. But it also came with risk. Elena looked hesitant after the meeting. They want exclusivity. That's how it starts Favors Pressure Secrets. Ethan met her gaze. "Then we say no. We don't compromise." She exhaled relief, washing over her face. "You mean that?" "Completely," he said. "This time we build something that lasts because it's honest." For a moment, she just looked at him, quiet admiration in her eyes. "You've changed." He shrugged. "You taught me how." By evening, the rain had started again. Ethan stood by the window, watching it blur the city lights. Elena joined him, wrapping a scarf around her neck. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "From mops and million-dollar contracts every day." Elena chuckled softly. "It's strange, isn't it? How two people from opposite worlds ended up building one together." "It's not strange," Ethan said, glancing at her. "It's fate with a sense of humor." She laughed a sound warm enough to chase away the cold outside. Then, as the rain tapped against the glass, he said quietly, "You know, I never paid you that salary I promised." She turned to him, smiling. "You couldn't afford it now." "True," he said, "but I'd trade every paycheck I ever made for what we have here." Elena looked out at the storm again, her reflection soft beside his. "Then you've already paid enough." Outside, the rain fell steady over Seattle, washing the city clean. Inside that small office above the market, two people who had lost everything were learning at last how to build something real. Not out of power or pride or money, but out of trust. And for the first time, both of them finally felt home. A year later, spring came quietly to Seattle. The rain softened, the air smelled like new beginnings, and Ethan Cole's life no longer felt like a headline. It felt like peace. TrueLink Consulting had grown faster than either of them imagined. They now had a small team, a few loyal clients, and an office filled with laughter instead of tension. But what made the place feel alive wasn't success. It was the rhythm of everyday life. Elena's laughter echoing through the hallway. Sophia running in after school holding her latest drawing. The scent of coffee, always a little too strong. It was imperfect. It was real. One Friday afternoon, as sunlight slipped through the blinds, Ethan leaned against the office doorway, watching Elena pack up her things. She looked different now, more confident, more at ease, her quiet strength no longer hidden behind a uniform. "You ready for the conference tomorrow?" he asked. She looked up. "Almost. Still can't believe we're the keynote speakers." "Well," Ethan said with a grin, "people love a good story." "Whose story?" she teased. "Yours," he replied. "Ours." She paused, meeting his gaze. "You think people really want to hear about a cleaning lady and a CEO?" Ethan smiled softly. "No, Elena. They want to hear about a woman who refused to stay invisible and about the fool who almost didn't see her." Elena's eyes shimmered with something she didn't try to hide. "You've gotten better at saying the right thing." "I've had a good teacher," he said. The next morning, the conference hall buzzed with quiet anticipation. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, and journalists filled the seats. Elena stood backstage, clutching her notes. Ethan noticed the slight tremble in her hands and leaned close. "You've got this," he whispered. She smiled. "Funny. A year ago, I was scrubbing floors in your building. And a year ago, Ethan said I was too blind to see the strongest person in the room." When she stepped on stage, the applause was instant. Elena took a breath, steady and deep. "A long time ago, she began. A man once mocked me and said he'd give me his salary if I could translate a document. What he didn't know was that I'd been translating my entire life languages, cultures, pain, silence. The audience listened motionless. I stand here today not because I fought for power, but because I fought to keep my dignity. And sometimes the smallest act of respect, a conversation, a chance can change a life." Ethan watched from the side of the stage, pride swelling quietly in his chest. When she finished, the room rose to its feet. not out of sympathy, but admiration. Later, as they stepped outside into the cool Seattle air, Elena turned to him. "Do you ever think about how strange life is?" "Every day," he said. "I used to think survival meant staying small," she whispered. "Now I know it's about standing tall no matter who's watching." Ethan reached for her hand, hesitant but sincere. "You've taught me that." For a long moment, they just stood there, hand in hand, under the soft drizzle that had once divided their worlds and now quietly joined them. That evening, as the city lights blinked across the bay, Sophia tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Mom says you used to be rich," she said innocently. Ethan chuckled. "Used to be." She nodded. "So are you still rich?" He looked at Elena, who was smiling from across the room, and then back at Sophia. Richer than ever. And he meant it. Because sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't made of money. They're made of redemption courage and the quiet grace of being truly seen. If you enjoyed this story about Elena and Ethan, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because every story, no matter how small, deserves to be heard. And sometimes the most powerful translations are the ones that happen between two hearts.